Ryan Ray and Ben Samuels present Bring in the Closers, a podcast on making deals and doing business.
Welcome to episode 14 of Bring in the Closers. After back-to-back recording sessions last week, we are slightly ahead of schedule. If you looked at the progress chart, we somehow got ahead of ourselves. I don't know how, but it's working out well with some of the travel that I have coming up and you have coming up. And you, of course, is my trusty sidekick, co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the greatest closer this side and that side of the Mississippi himself, the one, the only, Ben Samuels.
At least I'm on the correct side of the Mississippi. I wouldn't want to be on the east side. Once you get out on the east side of the Mississippi, I think there's something like there's something in the water. I don't know what it is, but there's something over there. I like this side.
No offense to Tim Kotzman, who came on a few weeks ago. No disrespect.
You know, I don't even think he would claim being east of the Mississippi yet. He's brand new. Talk to him in like a year maybe, but at this point, he's probably still claiming Texas. I don't know.
Yeah, he's forced east of the Mississippi. So, Ben, man, how's it been going? It's been a crazy few weeks. I say few weeks. Crazy week last week. I was traveling. We were driving and trying to link up between hot spots, dead spots, and everywhere in between. How was the week, buddy?
It was good. I had a number of things happen since last time we did this. I guess last time we recorded 2 episodes, but we're currently recording. What is it? October 7th. If people were listening to the September episodes, they would think that I'd be in Japan right now. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make that trip happen. One of those things, adulting in life is can be tough. Had a number, it's a good problem to have, but I had a couple of closings that were be going on. Had a couple of really big deals that I've been working on that really I had to have a finger on the pulse, and so it just wasn't a smart decision for me to be across the other side of the world. 14-hour time difference. I know when I told you. You told me something about I needed to get my crap together, but
I love the humble brag. I love the humble brag. Well, look, I was going to go on a trip for like 3 weeks to Japan. Was going to go tour the whole island, but I had to cash checks, so I stayed home. #adulting. I like how you presented that. You marketed it. You packaged it well. That was smooth. I mean, I got to give you props. That was smooth. You almost had me fooled, but it's the truth, though. So, I mean, the truth is the truth. So good for you.
Sales is really easy when all you have to do is speak the truth. I don't have to make anything up. It's right here in front of me. All I have to do is tell you what's happening. I'm telling you, if you listen to the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, they tell you all you got to do is pick up a phone and talk into it for a couple minutes and then press post and you'll get a lot of followers. Maybe I need to start doing that. Actually, you and I were talking about that over the last couple of weeks, trying to maybe get a little bit more out there. I think you and I are, to a different degree, but I think you and I kind of try to emulate the under the radar, and you just kind of execute on a quiet level. Although you talk about me, but I wanted to turn the tables a little bit. Uh-oh. So can we talk about the fact that in a couple weeks from now, I don't know if I like this. In a couple weeks from now, you're going on an all expense paid trip across the world to China to do some business development.
That is true.
Then you're working on something. I'm not going to spill the beans, but you're working on something that could be pretty lucrative and could be pretty fun to work with in South Africa.
Yes.
You're also going to somewhere in the Caribbean. I forget where.
Nicaragua.
Going to Nicaragua, and then there's a third place that I'm forgetting.
Well, I'm going to Denver tomorrow, which by the time this airs. So I got Nicaragua, Denver, South Africa.
I mean, granted, Denver, compared to DFW, Denver is across the world. That is true. But can we talk about the fact that you're not only killing it in the DFW area, you've got a footprint in the Permian, you're not running a number of businesses, but now you're actually expanding literally worldwide. So I guess all of what I'm saying is we're on episode 14 today, and you gave a pretty aggressive intro for me this morning. Next week, I think we're going to need to flip the script a little bit and give yourself a little bit more attention than you deserve, because someone has been quietly executing at a pretty high level.
I mean, it's all true. I mean, what do we say? It's all true. No, yeah, Ben, it's funny because one of the I didn't create this slogan, but one of the things I do believe in is having a lot of lines in the water, and I always use that analogy. And I try to keep a lot of lines in the water. As you know, some of those lines go good. Some of those lines I get frustrated with, and I'll call you. Is this worth my time? Or I think I'm putting a new line out, and I should be doing this. And so, you mentioned kind of Gary Vee or some of those guys. They'll say they're not overnight successes, and not that I'm anywhere near the level of fame or success those guys are. But it really, for me, it's just about, I have a lot of lines in the water. You can't read the whiteboard back here probably, but if you could, it'd be a bunch of stuff that I'm brainstorming about, stuff to do. And I don't know how else to describe it than that. But if you, no, Nate's moving it. Pull it back, Nate. Can't give away all my trade secrets just yet. But and that's just stuff that maybe we'll go with, maybe won't. But it's ideas, things.
I'm sorry. Does it say insert text here?
Yes.
Generic title there?
Yes. Please. Okay. Yeah, good. Steal Ben's idea is the third thing. But, it's really just a lot of lines in the water. And we joke, I think, second, third episode, I joked to you about your close rate, and we've kind of talked about that offline a lot. But the reality is there's plenty of lines that just the worm dies on the hook and nothing ever bites. And so these are just things that I've kind of kept bumping and eventually got a few bites on. So we'll see how they proceed moving forward.
So, Ron, I'm curious. Since you mentioned it, I wanted to see if you wanted to talk a little bit about. I know in the previous episodes we've talked quite a bit, at length about communication tactics and how to be actively listening and all these kind of things. But one of the things that I don't think that we've really touched on as much, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on. So, what are some of the things when you're walking into a meeting? Let's say that you're trying to get business from somebody. So now we're not just talking about putting a deal together and trying to add value. When you have the R Squared Global hat on, what are some of the things that you're thinking about walking into a meeting about how to present yourself, how to provide, how to quickly present the value that you can bring? What are some of the things that you're thinking about offline in your own head before even walking into a sales meeting like that?
Okay, so if I was going on a sales meeting for R Squared Global, the first thing I would do if I was going to meet with Ben Samuels would use you. Obviously I know who you're working for. So I'm going to look up the company. And I'm just going to type in the company's name in Google and see what go to news, see what the top 2 or 3 stories are, because I need to know about that. Then I'm going to go look you up on LinkedIn. I'm going to see where you went to college. Now, I happen to follow college sports pretty religiously, so that's kind of easy for me. But you went to, I'm trying to remember now, was it Boston University? I'm trying to remember where you went to. Where did you go to?
Right. Northeastern. Correct city, wrong.
Yeah. So, but let's say you went to Texas A&M or Texas or wherever, somewhere that has a more of a football presence. I'd kind of have that locked in. So it's football season as well. But if it was basketball season, whatever it was, I would go to the college. I'd look at that. So I want to equip myself with 2 or 3 things to get the meeting from strictly business to low key. More conversational as naturally as I can. And so I can do that through, oh my gosh, I saw y'all stock price went through the roof. Must be a good time around here. Something like that. Or I walk into the office to see the diploma. Oh, wow, you coach, you're a Missouri graduate. Derek Dooley used to coach at Louisiana Tech, and I grew up being a big fan of Louisiana Tech, and now he went to the Cowboys. He's kind of a controversial guy. What do you guys think of him up there in Missouri? So I'm going in with 2 or 3 things, and those are easy things for me. If it was something like cricket or rugby, I'd obviously struggle. I don't know anything about those sports, but I try to have 2 or 3 things, and then I'm looking for their office as well. Do they have a big deer head on the wall? Do they have fishing? Do they have family? I probably won't touch the family, but I might go there if it goes. So I'm looking for before I see them 2 to 3 things to kind of get off of the very business feel of the meeting, and then when I'm in there, I'm trying to figure out, is there a natural way to bring those to bear to talk about things that aren't just me selling you. And then
one of the things before you move on, one of the things that I think is really important that I don't get the sense that a lot of people do this, and I think it's really valuable. It can be so valuable just to, like you said, put the company's name in Google, and if you can offhandedly talk about a couple of the current happenings in their company, if you can talk about the deal that they just closed or the contract they just signed or something that they have done in the recent past, that in and of itself I find is really valuable, because that tells them that you're paying attention, you've done your homework, you know the market, you know what's going on. Like that in and of itself, just throwing something else, throwing out something really quick that gets their attention. It's just, like I said, current operations can be really valuable. That's something that I don't think is done nearly enough. And I think that in and of itself can really spark a whole conversation, because you can talk about one thing, and depending on how you structure it, kind of how you mention it, you can really easily dovetail into some really interesting things. And sometimes you kind of get, then disarmed, and they just start talking at you, and you can get a lot of information, and you can glean a lot from what they're talking about if you're able to kind of softball them something to get them going.
Right. Now, the only caveat that I would add is if it's negative news. So, for instance, if you remember 2 years ago, Pioneer stock fell like 20%. I won't lead with that. I'm not going to lead with, hey, your stock, your retirement's going out the window. But I need to say that because I've told it to some people, and they took it a little too literally. So I try to focus on positive.
Getting a little tight in here, right?
Yeah. But I also do want to be aware if there is negative news, like they had a pipeline explosion or whatever it is. I do want to know about that, because they might bring that up. They might reference, well, look, we would bring you in, but right now we just had this deal over at so-and-so, and I want to know about so-and-so, so I can say, oh, yeah, well, what happened there, or tell me about that, or whatever, because, again, that's getting them off of what I'm trying to sell them into something they're more familiar with. So, so if it's good, I try to bring it in. If it's bad, I try to make sure I'm aware of it. So the last thing I want to do is go into a meeting, and they just sold off 10,000 acres in the Permian, and they're moving to the Eagle Ford. I'm going to talk about the Permian assets, right? And that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on why they're selling it off. But so that information, you're right. It does. Listen, think about this. One of the things I think is kind of lost, Ben, is a lot of people want to be a number one. They want to kind of be the entrepreneur, or they want to be sales or do deals. The best person for those is the person who can serve as the number two. And here's what I mean by that. When you interview someone, you want them to have researched your company. You want them to have known stuff about you. You want them to know about the market. So when you go to sell someone, you're essentially becoming their number two, if you will. And so you want to bring as much value in that first meeting as you possibly can. And so the better you can do that, the more clearly you can communicate your value to them just by making them feel comfortable with you. Because if they're not comfortable with you, it's going to be hard unless you have something they have to buy. It's going to be hard, at least for us, it's been. The other thing for us that's important is that when we go to meetings, we don't always know if the person we're talking to is the person that can hire us, because each company has someone different with a different title, different department, things like that. So to your original question, what is my goal? If it's the first time meeting, is to have those things and then to end the conversation with, is this the person that can hire me or not? That's usually all I'm trying to get to. Now I'm going to transition and push and gear the conversation there. And then if I get to that pretty early, if that's a pretty easy thing where Ben offers up to me that he is the person, then I have some secondary goals, like we have to have MSA. How's that process like? Is that tough? Now, I'm not going to push that because I've achieved my primary goal, and then I can be conservative with their time and I can get out. I don't need to get the home run. They're not going to hire me the first day. I know all that going in. Knowing all that, the goalposts are pretty close. Is this the person to hire? If not, who? If that goes, I'm talking really, really, really well, I might throw out the MSA at the end. Say, hey, by the way, Ben, you said that you guys might have some work. It's going great. Is the MSA process difficult? That's all I ask. Is it difficult? Because sometimes it is difficult and sometimes it's not. If it is difficult, they will tell you, yes, it's very difficult. It's very strenuous. Now, I know that if I'm going to try to work with these guys, it's a very strenuous process. The MSA, depending on how they say that, the tone, how it's presented to me, I might explore that a little more. If they say, oh, no, it's super easy. It's just a day. It takes about 20 minutes to fill out. Well, if they say that and they're very upbeat about it, I might throw out there, well, if that's the case, can we go ahead and get that sent over to my guy to have him look at it? I have a standard script that I say there. We don't have any problem. I talk about we work for big companies, work for small companies. We have 3 or 4 things that hit. I try to get the MSA right then. But again, those are, I don't want to call them extremes, but they have to. I can't stress this enough. It has to be presented to me in a manner that I don't feel like when I hit them with, we do the MSA with me today, that they're going to feel like, oh, whoa. I don't want to get them, because I don't want to get them back on that business mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of the things I love that you said right there is setting the goalposts, because in a sales meeting, a traditional close can be thought of, okay, the person is writing me a check and there's a transfer of goods. Mm-hmm. But in these meetings, especially in like what you're talking about, a close can be something a lot shorter than that. It can be getting in the door. It can be just as simple as getting past the gatekeeper. That can be a win. That can be a close. And so one of the things that I wanted to dial back and talk a little bit more about Maybe not necessarily specifically about R Squared Global, because I think that sales cycle is a little bit different.
Sure.
But if you're a traditional salesperson listening to the podcast, what are some of the things that you would recommend? What are some of the ways in your career that you have found to be the most effective to get past the gatekeeper? What are some of the ways that you have found that you can get to the decision maker the easiest, the best, the cleanest?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I wish I said I had a standard answer. I have things that I do, and I'll kind of go through those. I don't know if any of these are going to be home runs for you.
So I'll start, and I can softball it, and I can let me softball this one up to you, and you tell me how this sounds.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm trying to get it past the gatekeeper is, okay, the gatekeeper's job is to cut out all the riffraff, to get rid of the noise, right? Their job is to make sure that anyone getting past them is someone that's actionable, that needs to talk to whoever the point of contact is. And so a lot of times what I'll say to a gatekeeper is, Ryan, I totally understand that your position here is to make sure that anybody that gets, and I'll say this, anybody that gets past you is someone that's valuable, someone that's worth the time of your manager or of whoever the name or what have
right.
you. And I understand that. My job is to make sure that the information that I'm providing is communicated the right way, communicated the best way. And it's probably best to hear it from me. And so rather than play telephone and maybe, be misrepresented or even really just put the onus on you to explain what I'm trying to do to the person in charge, what would it look like if I just was able to get the email address of the person that, that I'm trying to talk to, and I can copy you on the email, but at least that way the information is coming directly from me. And so that way, I'm able to present it in the, in the best way. Something like that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: when you're talking about gatekeepers, are you talking about like the secretary at the front desk, or are you talking about Bob, who you got referred to, but Bob's not the person, but he's not going to give you over to Sally, who's the right person? So which kind of gatekeeper are you referring to there?
And that's a great question, and I did stumble, over that a little bit because that was totally on the fly.
Sure,
but I think that message can be tweaked for both sides. I mean, in general, so if you're talking to the secretary or you're talking to the office assistant, really, I mean, a lot of times, and it sounds bad, and I don't want it to come off the wrong way, but a lot of times that person doesn't know enough to know how to frame something to their higher up. And so really they're just tasked with, okay, anybody that calls you, anybody that emails you, tell them to go away. Rather than, okay, you can listen to their information and then distill it and tell me what I need to know. Whereas the other, on the second side, if it is a traditional number two, a lot of times I will pitch that person, to kind of gain their trust, gain their confidence. And then again, listen, I know that you're probably not the decision maker on this, and so what do I need to do to make sure that this information is being presented the right way to John, or what have you? Sorry, I thought you were going to say something.
So if we talk about the office manager, administrative assistant, whatever, one of the things that I know from me personally is when I've had one of those type of people work for me is that if they will come to me and say, hey, you need to see so-and-so, it's harder to tell that person no than it is to tell Ben no. Does that make sense? It's like Ben's calling, he wants to see me, I'm like, no. The secretary comes in and says, hey, this is a really nice guy. Can you give him 5 minutes? It's really hard to tell that person no because she's with you or he's with you every day. They're talking to you. They kind of know. So getting the goodwill of the gatekeeper, especially from the secretarial administrative assistant position, is really important because they can actually be far more persuasive than the number 2 guy, because the number 2 guy isn't always wanting to pitch because his relationship's a little different. He has something to lose if it goes bad. The administrative assistant type, they don't really have a lot to lose because they're not involved in transactional deals and stuff like that, like you're saying a minute ago.
Yeah, and actually that's a great point. And to clarify something, because I'm kind of replaying what I said in my head, one of the things that I think is really important is when I say getting around the gatekeeper or ways to get around them, I'm not talking about cutting them out of the chain of communication. I'm not talking about circumventing them. I'm talking about what are some of the best ways to get them on your team so that they can walk into their higher up's office and be like, listen, this is someone that you need to talk to. Because, I think a lot of times, the gatekeeper, is tasked with telling people that are trying to get around them, hey, it's not the right time. But if you can be the one voice in the room that's saying, hey, Betty, I'm trying to get this accomplished. Here's what I know. Here's why I think it's valuable that your point of contact talks to me. What's the best way for me to get in front of them? That kind of allows them to do their job, but also gives them a little bit of power. Feels like they're part of the decision-making process, and I think that garners a lot of goodwill towards you as well.
I agree, and I would say that one of the things, just for a couple of examples, is we had it was a large company, so the gatekeepers here weren't necessarily gatekeepers in the traditional sense. It was a company that has thousands and thousands of employees, but they did validate your parking, which isn't a big deal to me. I pay for the parking or whatnot. But every time we took out a client to lunch, we'd buy them a dessert. Every time. We'd buy them a dessert. Every time we'd buy them a dessert. Now, I don't know who else was buying them dessert. Vendors were taking, a lot of vendors were coming in here, but we bought them a dessert every single time. Now, they were so far removed that they couldn't say, oh, you need to go talk to so-and-so here, so-and-so here. However, they would offer, who are you going to see today? And we'd say that. And they would throw out things like, oh, wow, he's never in here. If he's meeting with you, it must be a big deal. Or, just those little tidbits. Now, sometimes that intel was good to know. Sometimes it wasn't. But that's more than I had, and I valued that. And it cost me a cheesecake or a brownie or whatever, then so be it. But so I think that when you look at people in kind of administrative roles, sometimes they're devalued by the people inside the company. I mean, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. So getting their favor is very helpful. And if you're trying to go to a small family office, let's say, there's only 10 people in the office and one of them is this administrative assistant, his or her information on, well, Ben's actually Tuesday afternoon is the best time to call him. Usually Tuesday afternoons, he doesn't have a lot going on. Do you know how much I'd pay to know when to call certain people? I would pay good money if I knew when they weren't busy and I had a high chance of them answering the phone. So being nice to gatekeepers from the administrative role, I think is devalued sometimes. It's talked about in a lot of sales books, but practically it's devalued. Seriously, if you think about some of the deals we're working on, if we knew we had people we're trying to get a hold of, they're hard to get a hold of. If we knew when they weren't busy regularly, we would call them during that time, but they don't tell us that, so we can't get on the phone with them, right? And then go ahead. I was gonna say, and then if you're talking about the CEO's right hand guy, the number 2, the COO, I think that's a little bit different. And here's why: because the administrative assistant, whomever, he or her or whoever that is, they don't really have a lot to lose. The number 2, the COO or the right hand man, if he brings something to a CEO and it's not profitable, or if it goes bad, he's fearing losing his job. So I think you have to make sure when you're working with that kind of a gatekeeper or a project manager who reports to the CEO, I think you're working with those kind of gatekeepers, you have to make sure that you are answering all of the questions that they're going to get asked, making sure that, because the CEO is going to be saying no, 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 no. You have to really sell them on why this is valuable. As you said, bring them along the process, but you have to think about their role. Here you want me to go take something to my boss, and my boss might be a great guy, he might be the worst guy. It doesn't matter. He's still my boss, and if this goes badly, it's going to look bad on me. So you have to make sure that they are truly comfortable with the process and what you're trying to sell, pitch, whatever it may be. And sometimes I think salespeople, we get in there and we're like, oh, well, just take it up to Bob, and I'll go sell Bob for you. And you don't think about the fact that when Ben sends me to Bob, there's a lot of pressure on Ben, because if I go in there and Bob hates me, Ben may get a phone call into Bob's office going, dude, why did you send me that guy? And so I think we kind of lose, as you're saying, partnering with them and carrying them through that process.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's interesting. I don't think I'm trying to on the fly. So I've got about probably a couple dozen at least, what I would qualify as gatekeepers or office managers that, when I've got some downtime in Midland, I'll go grab, a dozen breakfast burritos and make a quick run to a few different offices just to hop in, face to, name to the face, show that appreciation. And I cannot tell you how valuable it is to then be able to pick up the phone and talk to that person on a first name basis. And like you said, hey, I'm trying to get in front of Bob. I've been having a hard time over the last couple of weeks. What's the schedule look like next week? oh,
Yep.
you know what? He's out of town until Tuesday at 2, but he's going to be in the office, so the rest of the morning on Wednesday. So why don't you pop in and I'll tell him you're going to say hi. I mean, you just got the keys to the castle. You got the time that you can walk into the office, and not only that, you've got the person that's in his right ear saying, I'm going to let him know that you're coming. I mean, that goodwill. I can't tell you how many deals I've been able to do. Just doors I've been able to walk in just by doing that little bit extra.
Yeah, so the scale could be little as a little slight passing remark that's kind of helpful to know, all the way to the person who actually sets the schedule for the decision maker, right? Because like you're saying, sometimes they set the schedule. And if you want to get on the schedule, you have to talk to this person. So even if you talk to Bob, he would say, hey, go call Sally. She'll get you on my schedule. So Sally can reverse engineer the process and just put you on the schedule. And then she walks in there and says, hey, Bob, here's Ben Samuels. He's the guy I told you about the other day. And then all of a sudden the whole ethos of the meeting changes because of that introduction. So I think it's something that can't be undervalued. It can't be overvalued enough because people aren't really taking advantage of this. And I get it. It's easy to try to go straight for the top dog, but it goes back to that line in the water thing. You can be trying to get in touch with the top dog while also talking to the gatekeeper. There's no law against that I'm aware of. Not in the United States, at least.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to accomplish a goal, why not try to take a number of different avenues to get to that goal, right? I mean, everything that you're doing is moving you closer and closer to where you want to go. I think that what we're talking about today, again, these are not complicated concepts, right? These are not like high level. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to do these things. But for the people listening, if you take the time to it can just be as simple as one of the things that I try to do, and I will freely admit on the podcast today, I don't actually handwrite them myself. I have someone that does it for me. But most every single meeting that I take on a first meeting, and especially after sales meetings, I'm going to write a thank you note to them and send a thank you note in the mail. I'm not talking about an email. I'm talking about an actual thank you note that someone has written, handwritten, put in the mail with a stamp. I think that little things like that are just kind of glossed over these days, but can be huge value adds and really get you on the radar. They really can stick out.
Yeah, I had one of my sales guys doing that for a while, and he did get some feedback on that does, especially when, if some of our bigger clients that we're dealing with, they're getting salespeople all day, every day. They will not remember you tomorrow if you call them. Had lunch with you today. Hey, this is Ryan. Ryan, we had lunch yesterday. We're at, what? Oh, yeah. So, you could be short attention span because they're getting bombarded. So I think, it actually can, I'm glad you brought that up. It can separate you from the noise, as you say.
That just reminded me, you kind of gave me some crap for it, but I'm going to say it anyways. No, nothing about you, but like a few months ago, I think this was like 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago, I got a phone call from somebody, and I forget exactly because this was a while ago, but he said something along the lines of, this is Joe Smith from such and such organization, wanted to follow up with you on the webinar that we had on such topic. On such a topic, what did you think?
Yeah,
and that's all he said.
Yeah,
and I have a pretty good memory, but I listen to a lot of webinars, and I'm like inundated with information on a consistent basis. And so I said, Joe, or whatever his name was, Joe, that doesn't ring a bell. Can you tell me a little bit more? And he said, it's from this organization. We were covering this. And this was like 6 weeks ago. It was sometime, I think it was like early September, maybe late August. And I said, I'm having a hard time remembering what was the date of the webinar. And he said a date that was literally like 10 weeks prior to the phone call.
April, May, or June or something. It was really early. Yeah.
It was at least 2 months prior to the phone call. I think it was closer to 3 months. Yeah. And I was thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, so even if I only listened to like one webinar a year, how am I supposed to remember like the intimate details about a webinar 10 weeks prior? Number two, there was no like preload of like, here's what I'm talking about. And it was like a random phone call that I hadn't gotten any follow-up prior, and I haven't gotten any follow-up since. And like the reason I'm bringing it up is because, okay, so yeah, that person followed up with me, but they followed up way after there was going to be any value whatsoever. And also, not only that, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The way that they presented it was, why don't you know who I am and what I'm talking about when it was so far, And so I say all of that to say, if you're going to follow up, make sure it's pretty quickly afterwards. I would advocate for the follow up being within 48 hours after the meeting. But also, be cognizant of the fact that the people you're talking to are busy. They've got other things going on. And so, to a degree, and the reason I think I'm bringing this up is to a degree, it's on you to remind them of the context, and it's on you to steer the conversation. It's not on the person that you're reaching out to remember all the details of the last conversation you had. So if you're talking to somebody about like the intricate, or if you're in the middle of the sales process and you're talking about product specs or any number of different things, it's not on the customer to remember those details. It's on you to remember those things and continue the conversation and package it up so that you're making the other person's job as easy as possible, as opposed to scrounging for details.
No, it's funny you say that, because I have a little script in my head that I use. It's one of those things I just developed, but I wouldn't have framed it that way. But you're right. So if I talk to Ben today, and it's a phone call, and we're going to talk a month from now, or I'm going to call him back in a month from now, I would call him back up, say, Ben Samuels, hey Ben, it's Ryan with RSREC Global. I talked to you about a month ago. We have da-da-da-da. We're doing da-da-da. You said to call you back. So I would I have a short little script, depending on what's going on, that I hit all that. The odds are Ben probably won't remember. But at least now he knows why I'm calling him back. And so, because you're right, the onus is on me. Because I used to say, hey, Ben, I talked to you about a month ago. How's it going? Who are you again? Well, so-and-so, so-and-so. Well, what are you calling about? Da-da-da-da. So now I just take the script, I just plug and play. Who am I? What am I doing? When's the last time we talked? Hey, Ben, sorry about lunch ago. I had coffee down at, Starbucks or wherever it was. We talked about this, and this. Just want to follow up on that, see where things are at. And
by the way, before you go any farther, one of the things that if you're listening to this that's really important is that it may seem irrelevant or not really consequential that you say like, hey, how's it going? And then let the person respond and then go into, hey, here's why I'm calling. But I think it's really important. The hey, here's why I'm calling. Here's here's what I need from you. Here's how long it's going to take. How's it going? All is in one breath, and then you let the person talk. I think that is really important, because that allows the person to say, hey, I don't really have time for this right now.
Yep.
Hey, you absolutely, I remember you. Hey, I don't remember anything you just talked about. But if you say, hey, my name's Ryan Ray, how's it going? And then let them talk, then you kind of have to like backtrack, and it might get a little awkward about like, hey, here's why I'm calling. But if you come out of the gate with everything in 25, 30 seconds right away, that allows them to not have any pressure whatsoever, and allow you to either talk more or be like, hey, this isn't the right time, and reschedule. And that's something you and I have talked about on a couple of other podcasts in the past.
Yeah, no, you're right. The one breath thing, you kind of take a deep breath before they answer. But yeah, and I have a tendency to mumble and talk too fast, so I got to kind of slow it down. But you're right, it is, and it's one of those things where, and I would say this about most of, we've talked about this some, I think on here, but definitely offline, is a lot of the things I've developed. Obviously, some of the things I've gotten from books, like Never Split the Difference. I can't emphasize that enough. I use some of the tactics talked about there in pretty regularly now. I think
we're going to need like a sponsorship for that book. I think we've mentioned that book on basically every podcast.
We need to get him on. We need to get him on the show. So Nate, this is your cue to get him on the show. But I think we need it. But that has been so helpful, because it helps. Some of the stuff I was doing a little bit, but it helped reframe how to think about conversations. And like I mentioned a minute ago, thinking about the person having a boss and their boss, how are they going to say that book really through the things he talked about really helped me remember that. And so I try to do that regularly. We had a call a few weeks ago with a client, and I was told, hey, it's going to be kind of contentious. The client's going to be pretty upset, and my first thing when I got on there was, hey, we understand you're not this department, you're this department, your budgets aren't the same. It's going to be, we need to do a better job of handling this different. We haven't. We've been thinking like the other group. We're not this group. And I went through and just took all that away. And the person, because that was part of the heartburn, respected that. They knew that I was coming to do, and I wasn't trying to be manipulative. I wasn't trying to be cheating. I understood what the complaints were, and I sympathized with them. So I just went ahead and owned them all, which is part of the thing he talked about in the book. Not necessarily own it, but using that. And it changed the whole we had a great call, a great conversation, and we got off. Everyone was like, oh, wow, that went a lot better than we thought it would. But so I don't know how I got off this tangent, but that book is fantastic. So we need to get that guy on the show, because it's great.
I mean, yes, that was a tangent, but I think it's really important. I mean, since we're talking about it, one of the things that you hit on there, I'm going to say it maybe in a little bit of a different way. If you can solve or address the objection before it even comes up in the conversation, you've completely taken the power away from that objection. Because someone, just dialing it back and making a really generic example, somebody can't tell you, hey, I'm not going to buy this because it's way too expensive and I can't afford it, if you've already addressed that objection or talked about it and solved that problem for them. Or, if you're talking about, hey, there's a defect in the product or we're in the middle of a contract and this didn't go the right way. If you get on the phone call, own it, say, here's how here's how we've addressed the problem. Here's how we're moving forward. Here's how we're going to remedy this. And here's the solution. How is the customer going to come back at you and be angry and come at you for not doing your job or not following through when you've already owned up to it? And complete, as opposed to, that didn't happen, or here's why it's not as bad as you think, or those kind of things. Those can blow up really easily, right?
One of the rules we kind of try to practice, and I try to practice as well, is I try to document, not like a CIA documentation, but I try to document, when a project's going on or deal's going on, and it's me and Ben and 3 other companies. We're all working for maybe one person. I try to document the faults in other people's workflows. So they were late on this, or they didn't turn this in. Now I don't use that. I just kind of keep that, and the reason is because eventually, sometimes the trains come and they come into a pass, and then you have to deploy that. I generally try to be to accommodate the other vendors on the project, while knowing that I'm storing up enough information to wreck shop if I have to. But I don't want to. You see, I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I'm doing it for like survival purposes. But to your point, one of the things we had a couple years ago, we had someone leave, and we were in kind of a bad way with the client, and I wasn't, I had some, this guy was, those are the people who work on the project, wasn't really something I was involved in. And so we go down to Houston, and it's like 4 of them and 2 of us or something like that. And so we sit down, and I said, I just want to start off by saying, we haven't met your expectation. We haven't done this. And I named off, all the things that I could. And then I said, this is what we're trying to do to fix it. It's 100% my fault, and I take responsibility, and this is what I'm going to do to change it. And then I gave them the floor. And this isn't Ryan trying to give himself an attaboy at all. I'm just saying, like, you could visibly see they kind of sat back and kind of looked around like, what just happened here? And guess what? We saved the client, still doing work for them. We fixed all the problems like I told them we would, and it went great because I got in there and understood what the problems were, worked with some of my staff to get it fixed. But we went in there and basically said, here's what we've done wrong. Here's why it's wrong. We are fully ready for you to unload on us because we made this mistake. And instead they said, okay, well, wow. They said, I think they said that's refreshing to hear or something like that. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think what you're getting at, and I think what, the point here is that it's not even necessarily about being mistake-free. It's about the fact that there's so few firms or so few people that will stand in front of a vendor and say, I messed up. Here's how I messed up. Here's how I have addressed it. That, like you said, it's refreshing. It's new. It doesn't happen. And so when you do that immediately garners trust. It immediately, I think it gives you a lot of favor because they know that it's not just, hey, I'm going to hit you over the head with the biggest invoice possible, and when things hit the fan, I'm going to be out the door. It's, hey, listen, we're in this for the long haul. We want to, our reputation and our work product is of the utmost importance, and here's how we're going to address that. I think that those. Go ahead.
And I was saying, and it was the lesson I had to learn. When I was younger, I would not deploy that. I would be very combative. I would blame the employees, or I'd blame the client. I'd blame the deadlines. I'd blame a lot of stuff. And it wasn't necessarily me blaming it. It wasn't necessarily true as far as, the client had unrealistic expectations, or this employee didn't do what I was supposed to do, or whatever. It wasn't that it was true. But guess what? The client's boss doesn't care about my problem. And my client doesn't care about my problem, right? Because that's not his problem, is that his boss is mad about something. And so, being sympathetic, and it's really simple because we want people to be concerned about our problems and help us fix them. And so if you're concerned about your client, your vendor, your whomever's problem, it makes a world of difference. And it was a lesson that I will say that if you knew me when I was much younger, you would be like, oh, that guy never did that. And you would be absolutely right. I had to learn it the hard way. I had to come across like an idiot a lot of times. But it's really changed the way things happen. You can't make major mistakes over and over again, but it does give you credibility, especially when you answer the bell and you do fix the problem. This is our problem. This is what we're going to do to fix it, and you fix it.
I mean, one of the things I was thinking about when you were just talking is, and I don't have any personal experience in this, but I'm going to throw it to you. For the people listening, think about what the power or the difference in dynamic between, so let's say one of your kids does something, really, really out of pocket at school. Shouldn't have done that. And they come home and, you talk to them about it and they say, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? That's not how that went. And they fight you tooth and nail. That's going to go that conversation is going to go one way. If the kid walks in the door after school and says, Mom and Dad, this is what happened. Here's what I was, here's why I think it happened. Here's, why I know I did wrong. And here's what I'm going to change about it. It's probably going to be a lot tougher to discipline the child at the same level that you would have in example one, right? And so that's kind of what I was thinking about is like almost if you own up to the mistake, it kind of gives you a lot more power to address it and remedy it on your own terms as opposed to deny and then you kind of get the hammer.
Well, I'm curious your thoughts on this is, because you may hit about this, is it better to ask permission than forgiveness? I hear that, or better to ask forgiveness or permission. I hear that a lot. I am not a fan of that moniker. I'm not saying I haven't ever deployed it, but I generally don't like it. I'll tell you why, but I'm curious your gut reaction to that statement at first.
Yeah, I think we probably have the same gut reaction. I think it's one of those things where it depends, and there's a time and place, and I think there are certain instances where you can take some certain liberties that might in the interim may not look great, but you can get to the finish line. But in general, no, I certainly don't adhere to that model. I think it's always best we've talked about since literally episode 1, set the expectation the right way on the front end, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I were to tell you, if I were to say, ask for forgiveness, not permission, that's, to me, those are on opposite sides of the spectrum. So I'm certainly on the front end.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that the reason it bugs me. So it depends on, now let's throw the extremes out. So Ryan is unable, or Ben's unable to be communicated with, and a decision has to be made, and it's got to be made now. The client's hopping up and down. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about I had a sales guy one time come to work for me, and I always tell my employees, I want the information. If I have the information, I feel like I can make the best decisions. You can call it egotistical, you can call it whatever you want. This is what I believe, and if you work for me, I'm paying you to give me the information. So that's just how I think. And this guy came to me, and he was getting some meetings, and then he goes, oh, I know this guy, and this guy was super connected, and he just left his job and he's looking, I think he's going to go somewhere else. And I'm like, why don't we hire that guy? He's like, well, it's probably too late. And I was like, well, when did he leave? And it's right when the guy, it was within the time that the guy had been working for me. Let's say he started on January 1. The guy resigned January 30th. And this is March 15th. So there's a month and a half in there where he could have told me about this. And I'm like, why don't we hire the guy? Well, I don't know. He may already have a job, And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me about this? He goes, well, I didn't want to play all my good cards up front. And I'm like, well, there's no card to play now. The cards, if you would have played all your good cards, I don't know if we'd been able to hire this guy or not, but this would have been a pretty big hire. It's you should have given me the information, and then I could have decided if it was even valuable for us or not. We could have pursued it. Maybe, if at the end of the day, an employee of mine, if I say, go do this, and it turns out disastrous, then it's on me. I told him to do that, and I can live with that. It's those kind of, I thought I would figure it out, and I didn't really think through it, and now we have this disastrous result. Those are the ones that are hard to swallow because I can live with my mistakes. I make plenty of them. I am not perfect. But I understood the rationale. I knew the bigger picture. And so when you ask for permission, or the forgiveness aspect over permission, is you're almost saying to the higher authority, because that's who you have to go to, as a higher authority. That's the point there, that you know more than they do. You have more facts than they do. Sometimes that's true. A lot of times it's not true. And because they have more information. And so it's really tough for me to swallow that one when it comes across my desk.
Absolutely. So for those that are listening that are in a more traditional sales role, here's what I would tell you. Part of your job, maybe not a majority of your job, but part of your job is to be the ears and eyes on the ground for the people above you. To be the people with the finger on the pulse. And that doesn't mean making sales. I mean, when you're at the taco shop around the corner, be listening. And if you hear something that you think may be relevant, forget of value, just relevant, make a note of it, tell the people that are above you. Those are some easy ways for you to provide value, number one. Number two, just like you said, someone that has boots on the ground that, let's say that I'm an SWD operator and I'm standing on boots on the ground at the saltwater disposal site, and landowner comes over to me and starts just talking about some stuff happening. I may not have any idea if any of that information is valuable, but if I can regurgitate that to the people, to the person that I'm reporting to, they may know a lot more than I do, and that may be, yes. Oh my God, you just unlocked the key. Mm-hmm. I've been waiting for that information, but on the ground, you would have no idea what whether it was relevant or not. So forget the filter. I would advocate if you have boots on the ground, one of the easiest ways for you to be on the radar in a good way, possibly get promotions, be in line for incentives, tell the people above you everything you're hearing, because that is the key. I mean, I have people that I pay an hourly wage to that basically their only job is to be a finger on the pulse and to be my eyes and ears on the ground in places that I can't have those boots on the ground. It can be massive.
Yeah, and sometimes this to piggyback on what you're saying there, sometimes people hear that and they go, "Oh my gosh, if I've reported everything to my bosses, I'd be bogged down." It's pretty simple. Hey Ben, SWDs, are we involved? Do we anybody involved, or are we tied up with SWDs anyway? Ben says yes. Forward on the information. Ben says no. Okay, well, today I'm not going to pass on this 2-hour story. I'm just going to move on. 3 weeks from now, though, hey Ben, SWDs keeps coming up again. Is that we sure we're not involved with that anyway? So it doesn't have to be the full conversation. It doesn't have to be the full. It could be something very simple that says, "Hey, I heard about Concho today. Are we targeting those guys? Yes, no, whatever." Because as you say, it can unlock it for the supervisor, and it's short, it's sweet. But what will happen if you're giving me that information and you keep saying SWDs and we're not involved, I'm probably going to start looking to get involved, right? So if you keep telling me 3 or 4 times a week you're hearing about SWDs, and we're not involved, I'm probably going to go, maybe we should start getting involved. So I'm going to start calling around because you're hearing about it. That means I need to be acting on it. So keep that in mind. I think that's what you're saying is exactly right. To get promotions, to bring benefit to those above you, is just to be able to pass along that information. Let them, I think as Vanderchucks, they trade off information. That's what anyone at a high level is really doing. You're trading off information, trying to figure out what it is that what you know, what you don't know. If tomorrow we start hearing about a certain thing in the oil and gas industry, we will start looking on how to capitalize on that thing. If that's close enough for us, if not, can we partner with someone? If it's too far away, and so yeah, I think I think that was a great point you brought up there. Don't ruin a good moment. Don't ruin a good moment.
It doesn't happen very often on this podcast, and I'm like left speechless. But that sounded like a genuine compliment. That was nice. It was like somewhat accurate. I just didn't know where to take it from there. I was momentarily thrown off. I apologize. I'm back on my game now.
In this relationship, I don't ask for forgiveness or permission. Just to be clear.
No, somehow we got past that point. I don't know how, but somehow we're
just a little arrow slinging.
How are we doing on time today?
We got about 5, maybe 10 minutes if we really push it.
We're getting close. I think those were some great points. I had a follow up in the middle of what you were talking about, but you had so many good points that it got lost on me. Actually, to circle back to something that we've talked about previously, there was something that you said that I don't have my piece of paper and a pen out to write down, because I was going to say something in response, and I didn't do that, so I failed my own mission here.
So I do want to talk about something. One of the things that you have inspired me. And God, can we cut that from the tape, please? You have inspired me.
You said it, not me.
One of the things that I used to do, and I stopped doing, I think I said on the show, is I used to write notes of my list and my task, and I've gotten back to that. And I ain't saying it works for everyone, but for me, it is so effective that here is just all my tasks, and I don't want to show them on the podcast because it's not for podcast consumption, but here it is. And so what I do is I just have a page, and I just write down what it is. It's short stuff. So like one is Denver list. That's simply, I'm going to Denver. I got a list of people to do, to meet with. And so then in the back of the book, I write the list down when I start working on that. And I scratch them off. And then after that list covers the whole page, I put an X at the bottom. And then I rewrite the tasks that I didn't scratch off on the next page, which helps me remember to helps me remember to do them. But then, so I have a whole page here. Now Mondays are pretty bad because I can't do anything. So this came over the weekend. I kind of re-jotted down this list. But let me tell you something. I have gotten more stuff, small stuff, and some big stuff done over the past week because I've gotten back into that mode. And I'm enjoying it. I'm digging it. And it's I kind of owe you some partial credit for that, as much as it pains me to say.
So I'm curious, one of the things, I think I may have mentioned this on the podcast and we may have talked about it, but since you brought it up again, I'm curious. One of the things that I find myself doing a lot of times is I do the same thing. I've got a written list. I was actually looking for it while you were talking, but I don't have it right in front of me. But there are times where I will write a task down that I've already completed just to be able to cross it off. It's just one of those things that, like, so if I'm sitting there on a Monday morning, so a lot of times I find myself doing these lists either at the very beginning of a day or at the very end of a day, and then at the very beginning of a week or the very end of the week. And so I did this morning. The very first thing I did this morning was I wrote down the to-do list of, and generally what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it is if there's same day items that have to get done, 7-day items, and then 30-day items. I kind of like to parse it out in those 3 buckets because that way it gives me an idea of, okay, so these are the things that I have to get done like right now. These are the things that are on the radar, but I have a little bit of time. And these are some things that are just kind of on the horizon because that allows me to kind of be always kind of ever present in my to-do list. But there are definitely times where I will write. So like this morning, what was it? I had to buy a couple of plane flights and organize some transportation stuff. And I had done that yesterday, but I wrote it down and I crossed it off just to kind of like little like attaboy, pass on the back, gets one more thing done. I don't know.
Well, no, I don't do that, but I tell you, once you start, as I look here, some of these things are immediate, and some of these things are things that I just like. One of the things here is I'm looking at some franchises that I'm considering maybe investing in or whatnot. So that's something that I don't have to do today. I don't. It could be today, it could be next month, it could be, next week. There's no rush, there's no timetable. But I keep putting it on there because I need to be reminded, or 3 months will go by and I won't have thought about it, and then I'll be like, oh God, I should have looked into that. And so I know that when I pull my list up, I can evaluate the urgency of them and the things. So I don't categorize mine. I just write them as they come to me. But that's just personal preference. Nothing wrong with it any other way. I just like having a list of this is all the stuff I've got to do. And of course, it's literally not everything I got to do. There's other stuff, but it does help. And I don't necessarily get the satisfaction off of crossing them off. That's not really for me. It's just that, like, there was this weekend, there was 2 or 3 things, and it's the fear of forgetting. I don't have to worry about. That's the big thing, is the fear of forgetting, because guys like me and you, we have ideas coming in all the time, and I'm sure the listeners do too. You got ideas all the time coming through your head. And some of that stuff is like, okay, let me put this down. And I have some, you talked about doing some kind of content stuff. I have some content ideas. I was at Denny's the other day, and on Saturday, I didn't tell you about this, did I?
No.
So I was at Denny's, and it was after my son's judo tournament on Saturday. And so we're sitting there, and next to us was, we're in a booth, and next to us was like a little barricade, and then the drinks in the kitchen, okay? And so I guess the manager, she starts having a sales meeting on the other side of the drink machine. So she is talking towards us, so her voice is projecting towards us, and she's talking about the sales of the upselling stuff, like milkshakes or extra waffle or whatever it was. And so she starts going through the numbers of all the stuff and how they're not hitting it compared to other national sales. Now, I'm sitting here with my wife, and I got 4 kids. So my wife and 1 kid had left, but I'm sitting here with myself and other 3 kids. And so she's going through this, and she's loud. I mean, I'm a loud talker too, so I'm sympathetic, but she's loud and she's projecting, and it's like, I don't want to hear about you trying to upsell me while I'm physically in your restaurant. Okay, like, this is a bad idea. And so she goes through it, and then she I think she cussed once, and she cussed twice, and I'm like, hey, I'm sitting here with my kids. And she goes, I'm sorry. as soon as I said it, I wasn't thinking. I'm like, well, it's a little bit ridiculous, and it was the absurdity of the cursing on top of the fact that you're having a sales meeting 4 feet from me while I'm eating at 2:00 in the afternoon. On top of that, I didn't get any service the whole time you have the sales meeting because you're having my waiter stand there listening to you drone on about trying to upsell. And so the whole thing was absurd to me. And so it frustrated me because of, and so anyways, with that being said, I thought that's a good content idea, is how not to, why you shouldn't talk about sales numbers in front of customers. So I got the book out and I wrote that down. So I don't have to think about it anymore. But writing it down, thinking it has helped me churn it out in the back of the book. I'll kind of go through there and I'll flesh out some points I want to hit to think about them. But I do use it for that as well, that I can write down ideas on something I want to talk about at a later date. And then the back of the book, I can go and kind of create almost like a fake blog post to kind of write out some outlines or some high points or things I want to hit on. And there's no pressure. It's just there. Whenever I want to come back to it, it's there. If I never use it, so be it. But probably on the podcast one day, this story will come up again, or something about the story, or so it's good, because I thought that was a prime example of, I'm not getting service now. You're not complaining. You're lecturing your wait staff on why y'all aren't making sales. You have a customer right here who can't get a refill, and then I've got small children and you're using profane language. Like, the irony is not, it should be there upon you of why maybe you're struggling. And I don't really care, and like, my kids have heard curse words before. I'm not overly offended by cursing. It was like, do we not see what's happening here? And then this guy's going to come and he's going to ask me if I want a piece of strawberry shortcake after I heard you lecture him about, no, I'm not going to buy it now. He didn't, thank goodness. But no, I would not buy it on principle alone. So anyway, sorry, I got off on that tangent again.
There's a Burger King joke in there somewhere.
There is a Burger King joke in there somewhere.
I'm not going to make it, but there's one in there somewhere. No, I think that's a great point. I think that kind of, that little snippet of a story is a very good example of what not to do. That is like, that's the antithesis of the first 14 episodes of this podcast, right?
Yep.
So I know we're hard on time. One of the things that I wanted to briefly touch on, because you mentioned it a couple of times, and I think it's valuable, and something that I want to hear your feedback on, because it's something that I think about consistently. So, for those that are maybe listening to the podcast that are kind of just getting started in their career, or maybe the type that like to have a more singular focus and maybe not move as fast paced as you and I. One of the things that I have found in my day-to-day life these days, quote unquote, is things that are actionable, hot items. Sometimes it takes me a week, maybe 2 weeks to get even to like the highest of the priority things. I think what I guess at a high level, what I'm painting is that the sales cycle, or even the communication cycle, sometimes for me can be pretty long. But someone emails me and says, "Hey, I need a little bit of your time." There are times where I just functionally don't have the bandwidth to even engage on that for 2 or 3 weeks, even though it's something that I want to engage on and I want to do. And I know that there are times where I will reach out to someone and they'll say, hey, get back to me in a month, or get back to me in 6 weeks. And, there are times where I will take that as I didn't provide the right value, or I didn't say that the right way, or they're pushing me off, when realistically it's just, hey, I've got too much on my plate right now. I can get to you, but it's going to be a little while. What would you say in terms of, to the people listening, how to kind of find that balance between respecting, the fact that sometimes it's just going to take the stakeholder or take the business owner some time to get back to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean a rejection. But also, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, an invitation to become more aggressive and more persistent. I think there's something to be said for, you kind of have to read the room, read the person. What would you say to that? And also, do you find the same thing? Like I said, for me, it just takes some time. Sometimes it takes extra time to get something on top of my plate, even though it is something that I do want to act on.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's, I think it goes back to where we started at, which is about having a lot of lines in the water. If everything that you are working on is dependent on this one person getting back to you, the pressure to make that call perfect, the follow-up email perfect, the handwritten note perfect, it's really overwhelming, because if this person doesn't get back to you immediately, you almost feel like your whole business is going to fall apart. And so I think I like to have a lot of lines in the water. I like to have a lot of people that I'm talking to. I like to know that if one deal doesn't happen, that there's other deals in the pipeline. So I've gotten better about being able to take that, and that's strictly a function of having more lines in the water. If I have 3 lines in the water, I get really nervous. I want to press it. I want to pressure the person to get back to me. If I've got 100 different lines and Ben can't talk to me today, I've got 99 more I need to go check. And then I'll just make a note, call Ben 6 weeks, like he asked, send a follow-up email, thanks for your time, and then in 6 weeks I'm following up. So for me, I handle that best by having a lot of lines in the water because I don't get focused on Ben not getting back to me. I've got 99 other things to do. If I've got 3 things, then I get really paranoid on, did I call him at the right time? Should I follow up? He said 6 weeks, but maybe 3 weeks would be better. And I start talking myself into almost losing the sale because I'm going against his wishes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really valuable. I think that frankly, I think it's different when you're talking about what you and I do versus, the boots on the ground sales guy that's working for, XY company, right? Because they may be sterilized into, okay, this is your territory and it's a finite territory. So you have a finite number of customers. And so there may be, to a degree, there may be only so far you can, kind of put out those lines, if you will. But no, I think that's really valuable. What I would say is, there's always, I take those opportunities to, become more effective and more efficient. And, meaning that if you're waiting, if the sales cycle is a little bit longer for what you're doing, I would advocate for, finding other ways to get in front of new customers, or reinvent the wheel and kind of try to, figure out some ways to expand your reach. But yeah, I think that
I don't want to cut you off there. Ben is cutting up a little bit, so let me kind of reiterate what he said in case it didn't come through on the audio there. Essentially what he said is, if you're in direct sales and you might not have exactly the ability to float as wide as Ben and I are, so keep that in mind. But if you are kind of a regional salesperson, you might want to look to add more, figure out ways to get more lines in the water. It was kind of a synopsis of it. I don't know if that's the internet connection or the microphone there, Ben, but we do need to wrap it up on time. Listeners, thank you so much. We'll be back for episode 15 next week. Until then, keep climbing.